Jujutsu Kaisen Chapter 269 has officially come out, and that means there's only 2 chapters until the series officially comes to a close in Weekly Shonen Jump. And I have definitely seen, especially thanks to this chapter that has released a few hours ago, that the community's overall opinion of JJK has definitely shifted more into the negative side. And I have been talking about this for the past few weeks, and I've even relayed my overall personal feelings on everything, of how things could be potentially handled a little bit better. But if there's one thing in particular that people have been wondering about, is JJK getting a part 2? Because something I highlighted a few days ago when I was talking about the leaks and stuff of JJK, is that the chapter 269, which I'm going to be talking about in this video as well, it does make you think that, Gege is setting up some form of, part 2, because it's like he introduces this conflict, he does settle the conflict, but it does bring up a big question, who's gonna be in power? Because it's like, we know the world now knows about cursed spirits, we know the world knows about cursed energy and techniques, and, with the whole 3 families and all that, one of the main 3 families fallen, what's gonna happen to, Jujutsu sorcery, what's gonna happen to, the society of Jujutsu sorcery, what's gonna happen, who's really gonna be in control? And with, Tengen basically gone, and the merger up in question, all that, there's just a lot of questions that people have. And it makes a lot of sense why people, after reading this latest chapter of JJK, chapter 269, they would more or less be left with a, that's it? That's all we're getting this chapter? Like, it really wasn't satisfying. One thing in particular that, obviously has still yet to be answered is Jujutsu Kaisen going to be getting a part 2. Well, we gotta take a look at this offer comment. This is an offer comment that came out this week alongside of the chapter of JJK that just released a few hours ago, and as you can see here, it says, "It's my first time drawing an ending of something. Even though we're in the final chapters, it still feels so fresh. Akutami Gege." If this doesn't say that Gege is actually done and not making a part 2, I don't know what else can. Obviously, this can be just, a ruse, this can be a lie, and he's setting up a part 2 and all that, and I'll talk about the intricacies of why that would kind of be a bad thing as well, but the main point is that Gege right here indicates, at least with this offer comment, that writing the series still feels very fresh to him. And now this obviously could be sarcastic, maybe he's being sarcastic, maybe he's not, but at least everything considered at this current point, it doesn't seem like he's necessarily bored of his story. He's bored of JJK, and he wants to wrap it up. It just seems like this is how he wants to write it, and this is the end. And here's the thing. Endings are incredibly difficult. I've discussed this with multiple endings in the past, with multiple series. I've talked about this with My Hero Academia, I talked about this with Tokyo Ghoul, I talked about this with Bleach, I talked about this with Naruto. You get the point. I've discussed endings in the past. I've talked about how endings are probably one of the most difficult concepts for any writer to do, because you can have a fantastic beginning, you can have a great middle section, but if you don't land that ending, most fans are going to be really resentful, and potentially not even care to ever read or recommend this series ever again once it finally draws to a close, because it's more like, a sunken cost fallacy. Like, for instance, like, is sinking my time into this product, is it worth it, so to speak? And basically, if you get to the conclusion and you feel like your time was wasted when you get to the final chapter or the ending of a story, you come to resent the said story. This happens a lot with people that read things or play games or whatever, and I feel like JJK is starting to creep into that territory because of a lot of the things that are just left completely unanswered. And so, let's talk about that. So, as I mentioned in the video I made 2 days ago about chapter 269, the chapter more or less, it introduces this plot point about new shadow style, and it's affiliated with Simple Domain, which has been an aspect of JJK that's been known for a while, like Simple Domains and stuff. We've known about it. This Simple Domains isn't something that came out of nowhere. But it has been very vague. It has. It has been vague in terms of its applications and stuff like that, but still, the general basis of Simple Domain, people kind of understood it. So anyways, this chapter comes out, and remind you, this chapter inherently isn't bad. It's not a bad chapter. But what makes this chapter bad is because when you look at the meaning of this chapter, and then you think about what's left. For instance, 2 chapters left. Only 2 chapters left. And it's the end. And looking at, Gege's, actual offer comment, it implies he's not making a part 2. And like I said, I'll talk more about this in a second. But basically, that means that this chapter, more or less, to a lot of readers, feels wasteful. It feels very wasteful for your final pages. And this is my opinion as well. I actually feel this exact same opinion as a lot of people do, and it's not me just jumping on the hate bandwagon or anything like that. I'm going to be blunt. I feel like this chapter in general would be fine if it was like 15, 20 or so chapters ago, but this chapter coming out when there's only 2 chapters remaining, it feels like it's completely disconnected from what's actually important within the story. And I do want to point out this once again, because I'm showing this off for comment a lot. Gege does mention that, this is his first time doing a finale, and it definitely shows. It 100% definitely shows. Now, let's get into the chapter, okay? And why this feels just so wasteful, okay? And why also it's a good chapter. I feel like I should, talk about both sides. So, let's talk about the goodness of it, okay? Before I get into the negative. The positives of this chapter is that we get a lot of insight to Mei, actually, and the new shadow style, a little bit about the, 3 families, the contributions of the characters, all that type of stuff, and what could have been. It's a fascinating chapter because, obviously, it makes you wonder if the story was a little bit different, if the characters would have done something a little bit different, maybe things could have been changed. It's like, regrets. And regrets are a big thing, and it is, entwined within the very theme of JJK regrets, curses, and all that. So when you factor in them regretting that, how the fight went and they could have done something a little bit differently, it does fit into the theme and formula of JJK. There is nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with the characters discussing the battle and wishing they could have done something different. But obviously they were fighting the King of Curses, the strongest sorcerer in history. It's not an easy fight. It's not something that, you could easily just do differently. And I feel like them more or less not being satisfied with that just showcases a little bit more about their character and how, once again, it plays into the themes of regret. But anyways, with the discussion of the battle and all of that, we have the introduction of this new shadow style, this binding vow, and how this binding vow basically gives details that the person that is the head of the new shadow style can siphon the life force out of the people, the users of the binding vow. And it's just like, that's kind of crazy. Like, that's actually crazy. And obviously the individual, the head honcho that was, in charge of this, they were trying to build up their strength, amass disciples and everything to be able to challenge one of the 3 families, or all 3 great families, to be able to become the head of Jujutsu Society. So it sets up this, battle that, was going to be going on. For instance, the old woman within this chapter, she legitimately was potentially going to be a villain in the future, taking down the other elders and the head honchos of the society, because, they're building up disciples. But obviously, Mei came in, and she settled this behind the scenes, and in a way, indirectly and directly, saved a lot of people, but also helped her brother out. And let's talk about that one. So Mei is obviously a character surrounded by controversy. Completely always surrounded by controversy. Anytime you ever see her discussed on anywhere online, you see people absolutely infuriated with the fact that Mei is alive, that Nanami is dead, etc. You get the point. People get infuriated with her being alive. And obviously, the reason why people do get upset is because her character, for the more or less, disregarding her very weird relationship with her brother, we have to look at the fact of what she has done within the story. She is a coward to a degree. She is willing to throw everybody under the bus for her own self to survive. She is very selfish as a person, and just straight up not a good person in general, just kind of like an evil person. And who would have thought people that are kind of mentally messed up and stuff within the story of JJK, like Jujutsu sorcerers, have to be kind of unhinged to a degree? Who would have thought unhinged people would actually be unhinged? Who would have guessed? But anyways, the obvious sarcasm aside, we do need to talk about the fact that Mei, she obviously has been a character that's fascinating, more or less a schemer behind the scenes, all about like money and gain and all this different type of stuff, and you just didn't know what she was going to do, and it was always this, thought process that she could theoretically become a villain of some kind, because of just how she is as a character. This was definitely a discussion, not like a big, massive discussion, but definitely discussions that Mei isn't, quote-unquote, a good person that's probably on everybody's side. She's on her own side. And in the case of this chapter, chapter 269, it's basically revealed that that subplot of her potentially being a villain is more or less disregarded. She's not going to become that. But on top of that, she had a conversation with Tengen. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember anywhere within the JJK manga Mei talking with Tengen. I don't remember this. And if there is a panel or mentioning of this, please do let me know in the comments below. Because I don't want to say something that, happened and didn't happen, but I don't remember it. It could be me forgetting, but regardless of that notion, disregarding that, Mei had a conversation with Tengen, and basically more or less got information about New Shadow Style, the head honcho of this binding vow, which led her to the old woman to take her out. And one of the main driving reasons to why she took this individual out was because the person was meddling with her brother's life. She even mentions this, like basically saying, "You're trying to make my little brother defective, so this was bound to happen." Basically saying that thanks to her brother also using simple domain and all this different type of stuff and all that, being able to use abilities and being associated with the binding vow, it was going to hurt him. It was going to hurt him. She didn't like this. So obviously with the old woman potentially tampering with, Ui, she took it upon herself to get rid of the obstacle, so to speak. So it showcases that Mei isn't selfish, completely selfish. Obviously, she did this for selfish reasons because she loves her brother, and she wants her brother to be useful and not defective. So yes, it is definitely selfish, but it shows that she doesn't only just care about her own life, she does have some feelings for her brother, which obviously can lead into more controversial topics. Not going to get into that one. Anyways, the chapter of JJK has this stuff with Mei that, she settles and gets a lot of development from it and all that, and I think it's interesting. It's great, but it feels like it's little too late, too little at this point in time, because once again, this is a very weird place to really add all this stuff in when there's only 2 chapters left. It's like, I don't think majority of the community of JJK really wanted to see a chapter dedicated to the characters basically yapping about what they could have done better with the battle strategy, and then Mei taking out someone that's apparently using a binding vow to take on the 3 families, which it's not even relevant anymore. So it's just like, this is why people think there's going to be a part 2, and so I guess let's segue into that. So like I said, Gege obviously stated that he's writing a finale, and it's clear that there's probably not going to be a part 2, which just leaves so many things completely unanswered. So many things that you just have to wonder about, like, why? Like, unless, Gege's trolling, and, he is going to do a part 2 of some kind, it's just like, why do all this stuff with Kinjaku? Why do this calling games, this merger, all these different things, when it literally has no purpose? It does not have any purpose. Now, yes, there is 2 chapters left to answer some questions, don't get me wrong, but it's like, this is a chapter that legitimately just felt like a waste of time. It would have been a fine chapter anywhere else, but this late in the game, it does not matter. It's lore and world building that does not matter at this point, because it feels like it's trying to set something up than actually conclude something. So that's all I'm saying. But, yeah, besides that, I want to say what I said in my other video, no mention of Gojo whatsoever in this chapter, which is very questionable. I still am very curious about why Gojo is not being mentioned at all. There's like no funeral service, nothing. And it's just like, bro, Gojo did a lot. Like, it's crazy. It's legitimately crazy. So, I don't know. I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for watching. May all of you have a fantastic day or night wherever you live. Be safe, stay healthy. Chibi out.